And our final speaker for this evening, ladies and gentlemen, from Curtin University of Technology, petroleum geologist, Professor Andrew Wadsworth.
To set the record straight, I'm not actually a geologist, I'm actually a petroleum engineer. And you may be wondering why a petroleum engineer is standing here tonight, because I probably come from the most vilified industry environmentally in the world at the moment, the coal industry. The reason is that I was commissioned together with my colleague Alexis Wadsworth to do an audit of the pulp mill by the Parliamentary Greens. And during that audit, I happened to look at dioxins. Now, why do I look at dioxins? Because the mathematics of dioxins is exactly the same as the mathematics I use in my oil business. And I found a fundamental mistake in what Guns had done. They actually got the calculation out by a factor of 338. This is in addition to the factor of 45 that they'd already reported in September last year. I would have thought a factor of 338 would be corrected very promptly, but it wasn't. In fact, Guns and their consultant denied they had made a mistake and continue to deny they made a mistake. Go to Guns' website, look up one of their fact sheets, and it states there that I are guilty of a falsehood in claiming this error exists. Well, thank God for the chief scientist, in little part because he actually confirms they made the error. But that's why I'm here. I wasn't an expert in dioxins when I started. I probably am an expert in dioxins in sediment transport today, and that's what I will talk to you about. What I do in my job, particularly, I noticed that Stuart said that he's retired and therefore he can't threaten his job. I'm not retired. I earn my living not as an academic, actually as a consultant to the oil and gas industry. And generally speaking, people trust what I say. They assume I'm going to be correct. And I try and do that. So when you stick your head up in Tasmania, it's a small place and you have a big head, it tends to get locked off, and I've already lost my So, what principle do I use in the oil and gas business? I use the principle of what you see is what you get. It's very simple. If you see something good, you know it's going to be good. If you see something bad, it's going to be bad. And I apply this in my work, and I apply it to the pulp mill. So you look at the literature. And what do you see with dioxins? Well, dioxins, we know, are the most highly toxic substance known to man. There is actually no lower limit than if they cause cancer. But what do we see with respect to pulp mills? In the 80s, and thank God they didn't build Wesleyvale, in the 80s the pulp mills were highly polluted. They were, the amount of dioxin being poured out there would curdle your blood, probably quite literally. And we ask ourselves, where were these polluting mills? They're in Sweden, Finland, in North America. And how do we know they polluted? Because they killed the fish. In fact, entire species disappeared. So what do we see now? Well, they cleaned up their act enormously. And that's what we're told this mill is going to be a good modern mill. And the Tasmanian government set a standard of 13 picograms per litre of dioxins in the effluent. And we're told that's world's best practice. That's actually complete rubbish. World's best practice is less than 1 picogram per litre, and probably below that. Swedish mills average less than 0.8 picograms per litre. That's a factor, if I do my head quickly, something like 120 times better. That's what the Tasmanian government said, probably the lowest standard of a Western world pulp mill. But is this actually important? Well, it is. Because even if we look at these low levels, even the Swedish less than 1 picogram per litre, we see impacts of dioxins in the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea is the most highly polluted sea in the world. It's got huge levels of PCBs, dioxins, you name it, that junk's in there. But when you go near a pulp mill, you actually see the sex ratios of fish change. When they shut the pulp mill in, the sex ratios go back to normal. What else do we know about pulp mills? When this pulp mill is in production, it's going to be the largest single source of airborne dioxin emissions in Australia. Now, what do we know about airborne dioxin emissions? You've probably heard it on the news recently, and I looked up the literature. As you go near dioxin emitters, the male sex ratio changes, not just in fish, it changes in humans. In Canada, Native Americans living near industrial zones, the sex ratio has gone down to 40% males to 60% females, over the normally 51% males to 49% females. And what this is, by itself, not necessarily a bad thing if you happen to be a male. The question is, will that male be able to reproduce? And this is the impact of the effluent in the oceans, is that these sex changes, we actually know for a fact that pulp mill effluent changes the sex ratios, it changes the gonad size, it changes the reproduction. This is documented of pulp mill today from Sweden, British Columbia and Quebec, which are the best in the world. Now, why is this important to our fisheries? Well, Australian salmon, for example, breed on the east coast of Australia, but they grow, the fish grow in Bass Strait, they grow in the coves and all the little inlets around, guess where the pulp mill site's going to go. It takes 4 years for Australian salmon to grow to maturity and then off they go up the east coast. We're not going to know for 5 to 10 years if those salmon can reproduce themselves. That's how long it's going to take. And this is the problem with the Turnbull approach. Turnbull has actually put the cart before the horse. He said, go and build a pulp mill. If you've got a problem, we might shut it down. That's absolutely absurd. That's not science. That's not a scientific approach. They do other absurd things. He set limits, for example, 850 picograms per kilogram dioxins in the sediment. That's Canadian value for Canadian freshwater environments. The Canadian says we've got no data on marine environments. Australia, we've got even less data than none. What does this mean, this 850 picograms? Canada, they say, that's going to be the limit below which we won't see an impact on sensitive species. That's very good in Canada because every pulp mill in Canada, the dioxins in the sediment is greater than 20,000 picograms per litre. All the sensitive species have died. So what are we going to see? If I apply my principle, is what you see is what you get. I know what we're going to get. We're going to get sex ratio changes, we're going to get denser sensitive species, we're going to have problems with our abalone fisheries and our scallop fisheries because they're filter feeders, they actually feed on the pulp mill effluent. And this is the problem. It's not, as I say, I'm not an expert in dioxins, so I can read the literature. And we sent, Stuart and I, we sent all this information to the expert panel. And they didn't ignore it. They said, let's put it off till tomorrow. And to me, as a scientist, as an engineer, and again, coming from an industry where we've learned the hard yards in the oil industry, we're not allowed to deploy it. We probably go through the most rigorous environmental conditions you can imagine, and we still get it wrong. But I think we're going to try hard today. And this pulp mill, unfortunately, completely fails. If this was an oil field, an oil refinery, it wouldn't get off the ground, and quite rightly so.